AOSD Chandler. AOSD. Watch me bring it out.
Assembly of Sound Doctrine.
AOSD. Watch me bring it out.
You know the script, so what they saying? You brought her with you. Now you're playing. Ain't playing with your plans. Scriptures watch the land. I'm powering up with higher gods like Super Saiyan. I can do it solo. Kill a whole doctrine with 3 quotes. From the Christians to the Hebrews. They're all lost like Nemo. And they give them a shot like a free throw. Break it all down like a peephole. Take notes from the investigating knowledge. It's a lesson from the spirit in the kingdom that's a keyhole. Oh no, I know it's been fulfilled in all flow. The kingdom is here, I'm hyped, so underneath we might go. Come learn with me, this new covenant living. The kingdom within, loving all of God's children. Watch me bring some truth, bring works of good fruits. Hebrew literature, rip doctors like saber tooth. I'm gonna let it loose from the Passover to the Feast of Booths, from the law of Moses, from head to toe to the new creation. Everything is new. AOSD, 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 Assembly of Sound Doctrine.
Shalom, 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 shalom. Hope y'all having a fantastic evening. Now let me cut that down. This is Elvin Israel from the Assembly of Sound Doctrine Chandler. Let's get ready to sign into my clubhouse. Hopefully, there we go. All right, so I'm signed in. Replay's on. This is Elvin Israel from the Assembly of Sound Doctrine Chandler. As you can tell, a lot of subscribers, gain more subscribers. A lot of people are not gonna agree or like the information that I present sometimes, because it kind of puts the Bible into a more ancient narrative, and it takes away a lot of the modern hope that has been uh, taught to our community, to our century, and it kind of puts it in its perspective, so you can actually see how indeed that the Most High works, and it shows us that all things have been fulfilled uh, prophetically, and we're not waiting on any prophecies to occur in today's time, and we're living our life believing on the Son, and showing love to one another. How the kingdom of heaven was meant to be in the first place, before hatred and transgression of the natural order and etc. happened. All right, one sec. So what we're gonna do? We're gonna do part 2 of God's fight against the rulers of the nations. We're doing part 2. So this is the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share the YouTube channel. Hit the bell on the YouTube channel. And like the videos. No matter if you agree or disagree, you can hit like or dislike. Also, you can comment, and I will respond to all comments that's presented. So, let's get ready to begin the series. So the next step in the Lord fighting against the rulers of the nations are found, and let me get to it. Let's go here. We're going to go to war, or we're going to start with the war. Yeah, War of the Jews. Let's go to the next one in the Lord fighting against the nations. We're going to go to Josephus, War of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, Section 1, lines 120 and 121. Now let's see if I can find it and my hard copy real fast so I know exactly where we should be at. So we're talking about the Lord fighting against the nations. And in the part one, we saw that that fight against the nations was actually each time Israel, Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom, together, separated, each time Israel was oppressed by um, the rulers of the world, right? Who supposedly, according to the ancient Israelite understanding, the rulers of the world got their power from Satan. Uh, that's the reason why the rulers of the world at that time, they was dogmatic, they were violent, abusers of their brethren, killers, and etc. Right? Shalom, brother Demetrius. Welcome aboard. So, oh, nothing, brother. I'm just trying to finish up this guys fighting against the nations with this second part of the lecture. It's not gonna be as long as the first one because I only got a few more. So if you want to say anything, just let me know and etc. But I'm starting with War of the Jews, book one. So we was actually discussing how the Lord, each time someone came against Israel as an oppressor, as a ruler. And we know that the ruler of the world was Satan. So supposedly, in the ancient Israelite mindset, whoever got rulership that was not of Israel got their rulership from Satan. So, in order to defeat the kingdoms of the world, you had to defeat Satan. Let me say that again, because I know in Revelation chapter 11, when the kingdoms of the world has become the kingdom of our Christ, right? When that marriage happened, when he started marrying the nations as well as Israel during that marriage ceremony, a lot of people don't understand what that means. They want their oppressors to go into slavery and etc. But the ruler of the world was Satan, according to Moses in Genesis 1. When Adam and Eve gave their dominion over to the serpent, they was being ruled by that sin, that serpent, that Satan. So if Satan was given the ruler's powers, and we find out that it was really the Lord bestowing rulership to these individuals. The Lord was the one that was giving each empire their rulership. But the people of the time felt like the rulership wasn't coming from the Lord, but was coming from Satan. And these individuals, who was these pagans, they was worshiping any and every god. They was not worshiping God as the true one giving them power. This is why we see in Nebuchadnezzar's time, he actually was more in tune with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Therefore, when he took it upon himself to say that the power came from himself, he was punished. But we see later on, as time progressed, that punishment stopped happening. Why? Because the nations of the world started going more and more into idolatry, saying that it was their gods that was giving them power. And to Israel, their gods were demons, so they was getting their powers from Satan. So the way to stop the rulers of the world from being in dominion, from ruling, you had to stop Satan. The power of Satan had to be shed. So that's the point. That's what's going on in the book of Revelation. That's what Christ's ministry was all about, stopping the power of Satan. Him casting out demons and etc., showing that he was actually waging war on Satan's empire. So this is why when the 70 disciples came up to him and said, Lord, even the demons are in subjection to us in your name. If you guys don't understand that subjection part, that is dealing with war. They was waging war on the demonic kingdom. And the Lord said, when they said that, he said that he saw Satan fall out of the sky like lightning into the earth, meaning Satan was using his power, was losing his power of the world at that time. He was losing his exaltation. He was actually going from that power to that being a mere man in imagery. So that's the whole point. But let's go now to the Lord fighting against the nations, because people, they don't want this to already have occurred. They want to see it in our timeline, in our future. In part one, we show how the Lord was fighting against anyone who came against Israel. And now in part two, we're going to show it once again, and we're going to see how the fight of the Lord changed. Once again, we're going to see the fight of the Lord changed. So now, War of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, Section 1. We're going to read lines 120 through 121. If you got some coffee, get your popcorn, get your notes out. This is going to be a lecture. It's going to take just a second, but let's do it. It says, now Hyrcanus was heir to the kingdom, and to him did his mother commit it before she died. But Aristobulus was superior to him in power and magnanimity. And when there was a battle between them to decide the dispute about the kingdom near Jericho, the greatest part deserted Hyrcanus and went over to Aristobulus. But Hyrcanus, with those of his party who stalled with him, fled to Antonia and got into his power the hostages that might he. It's supposed to be. Let me see if that's supposed to be B. That might be a misunderstanding in the PDF. Let's see here. Yeah, it is. They got he, but it's supposed to be B. That might be for his preservation, which were Aristobulus' wife and with her children. But they came to an agreement before things should come to extremities, that Aristobulus should be king, and Hyrcanus should resign that up, but retain all of the rest of his dignities as being the king's brother. So if what people don't understand what's going on here, we have a fight between who's going to take over the kingdom in the BC era. The fight was between the Jews inside of the land of Judea. One of them wanted Aristobulus to take over, and the other one wanted Hyrcanus to take over. And eventually the Pharisees and the Sadducees split up, and they to go on one side and the other on the other side. And this is when all of the civil wars actually start erupting inside of the land of Judea between the Pharisees and the scribes. At this point in time, eventually the quote-unquote Essenes, they get up, they leave, or the sons of Zadok, they get up, they leave the land of Canaan, they go into the wilderness, they go into Qumran and all of that stuff, and this is when they create all of this literature. So the Dead Sea Scrolls was composed during this time period when these civil wars was happening between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So this is why when you go into the Dead Sea Scrolls, you see the war between the children of the darkness and the children of the light. This is that eschatological war found in the war scroll in the Dead Sea. And the children of darkness were considered the children that follow the lunar calendar, and the children of the light was considered the children that follow the solar calendar. And these two sects, one being one being the other, they were at war with each other. And because of the covenant they made with the outsiders, with the Romans and etc., this is why you see all nations along with Israel fighting against God's chosen people and that Israel. So you got the wicked Israel with the covenant they made with the nations fighting against the children of light and God and their God. So this is what the battle was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was between Israelites and the covenants that Israel made with the foreigners. So this last war impending, dealt with Israel against Israel and the covenants of either the Lord or the other nations. So I'm just trying to give it the historical perspective of what ancient Israel viewed the last war of prophecy was going to occur between. Good Israel against wicked Israel. And the Lord against the nations. So when you got the Lord fighting against the nations, understand that the BC era Israelites, those Zadok priests and all that stuff, who had the records of the patriarchs and had the records of the Torah and etc. They put this war against the other nations when the Lord is fighting against other nations. He's actually fighting against the other nations because Israel made a covenant with those nations to fight against the children of the Most High. So you guys got to understand that in context what's going on. Pick up your Dead Sea Scrolls. So now, and look at some scholars, listen to some scholars talk about this war, of the war scroll. Now, hereupon, they were reconciled to each other in the temple and embraced one another in a very kind manner, while the people stood round about them. They also changed their houses, while Aristobulus went into the royal palaces, and Hyrcanus retired to the house of Aristobulus. So now we have the beginning of what was going on. So we're going to go to section 5 now. So let's go to section 5. So we find out that it's infighting between Israel, civil wars between Israel. So now we're going to read War of the Jews, book 1, chapter 6, section 5, 133. It says, and this, his behavior, Pompey had great indignation. Hyrcanus also and his friends made great intercessions to Pompey. So now you can see this is when they tried to bring the Romans and make a covenant with the Romans, Hyrcanus, to fight against Aristobulus for the kingdom of the Jews. So now this is when that covenant is made. So check this out. So he took not only his Roman forces, but many of his Syrian auxiliaries and marched against Aristobulus. All right, and we're going to read down to there, right there. Okay. But when he had passed by Pella and Scythopolis and were come to Korea, where you enter into the country of Judea, when you go through it up through the Mediterranean parts, he heard that Aristobulus was fled to Alexandrium, which is a stronghold fortified with the utmost magnificence and situated upon a high mountain. And he sent to him and commanded him to come down. Now his inclination was to try his fortune in a battle, since he was called in such a imperious manner, rather than to comply with that call. However, he saw the multitude were in great fear, and his friends exhorted him to consider what the power of the Romans was, and how it was irresistible. So he complied with their advice and came down to Pompey, and when he had made a long apology for himself and for the justice of his cause in taking the government, he returned to the fortress. And when his brother invited him again to plead his cause, he came down and spake about the justice of it, and then went away without any hindrance from Pompey. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm just trying to see how far I'm going down. Yeah. Okay, I'm done with that one. So now we're gonna go. So we see Pompey come, try to get Aristobulus, and we see the exchange that happened between that. So we see that Hyrcanus made a covenant with Pompey. Pompey came to come against Aristobulus to get the government back and to get it handed over to Hyrcanus, right? So once we go to book 1, chapter 7, section 1, we're going to find out what was the result of these things happening. So we're going to read line 141. It says, at this treatment, Pompey was very angry and took Aristobulus into custody. And when he was come into the city, he looked about where he might make his attack, for he saw the walls were so firm that it would be hard to overcome them, and that the valley before the walls was terrible, and that the temple, which was within the valley, was itself encompassed with a very strong wall, and so much that if the city were taken, the temple would be a second place of refuge for the enemy to retire to. So we see Pompey now coming into the city of Jerusalem. So Pompey is now trying to enter, he has now entered into the city of Jerusalem to take Aristobulus. So Aristobulus had went back into the city of Jerusalem. He had did some things Pompey didn't agree with. So now Pompey is waging war on Aristobulus inside of the land of Jerusalem. So what do we find out what happened? When the Lord's people are warred against, the Lord, oh my bad, hold on. I'm gonna have to mute you, brother. I'm gonna have to mute you. Alrighty. Yeah, you muted yourself. Alright, so when the Lord's people, right, is fought against, then the Lord respond. So now we got Pompey going into the land of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, to fight against Aristobulus. So now Pompey has came into the promised land to wage war. So now he's making himself an enemy of the Lord. He's making himself an enemy of the Jews. So let's continue to read what goes on. So we're going to go now to section 5 of the same book. We're going to read lines 150 through 151. It says, "And now did many of the priests, even when they saw their enemies assailing them with swords in their hand, without any disturbance, go on with their divine worship, and were slain while they were offering their drink offerings and burning their incense, as preferred the duties about their worship to God before their own preservation." So now you see Pompey and the Romans coming in, disturbing the worship of the priest to their God. And it said the priests continued their worship in the process of being slain, rather willing to lose their life instead of stopping the worship of their God. So now let's keep reading. "The greatest part of them were slain by their own countrymen of the adverse faction, and an innumerable multitude threw themselves down a precipice. Nay, some there were who were so distracted among the insuperable difficulties they were under that they set fire to the buildings and were near to the wall and were burnt together with them. Now of the Jews were slain 12,000, but of the Romans very few were slain, but a greater number was wounded." So now you got the wounding of the Roman army. Not a lot of them died, but a greater number of them was wounded than died, though. So we see that now the Most High is starting to work against the Romans. So you had Israel once again killing Israelites inside of their worship area, and then you got the Romans inside of it also. But in all, 12,000, and this can be an estimate, 12,000 Jews were killed. So we have a war waged upon God's people. We got some of the Jews that was waging the war, them dying alongside of their brothers, and then we got the Romans who helped with the wicked Jews come in, and some of them were slain, but a greater number of them was wounded. So let's keep going on and find out what happens. So we go to War of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 7, Section 6 now, and we're going to read 152 and 153. So it says now, let's see here, 151, 152. So we're going to read, I said 152 to 153, yes. "But there was nothing that affected the nation so much in the calamities they were under, as that their holy place, which had been hitherto seen by none, should be laid open to strangers. For Pompey and those who were about him went into the temple itself, whether it was whether it was not lawful for any to enter but the high priest, and saw what was reposited therein, the candlesticks with its lamps, and the table, and the pouring vessels, and the censers, all made entirely of gold, as also a great quantity of spices heaped together with 2,000 talents of sacred money. Yet did not he touch that money, nor anything else that were there reposited. But he commanded the ministers about the temple, the very next day after he had taken it, to cleanse it and to perform their accustomed sacrifices. Let's see how far I'm going to go down to. All right. Moreover, he made Hyrcanus high priest, as one that not only in other respects had showed great alacrity on his side during the siege, but as he had been the means of hindering the multitude that was in the country from fighting for Aristobulus, while they were otherwise very ready to have done, by which means he acted the part of a good general, and reconciled the people to him by benevolence than by terror. So now we have Pompey. Not only did he come and fight against Aristobulus, the Romans came in under his command, slain, helps with the slaying, or the slaying of 12,000 Jews, and he himself walked into the Holy of Holies, right? Now, thinking about how the mindset of the Jew was back then, he should have pretty much fell dead, right? He should have fell dead going inside of that Holy of Holies, which no one was able to go inside. So this kind of shows you that the Lord wasn't really with that temple service like people proclaim that he was, even till today. Because Pompey, the Roman general, after he ordered the slaying of thousands of Jews, was able to walk inside of the most holy place on planet Earth, and he did not die at all. But what did he do? He made himself an enemy of God. He killed God's people, and then he goes inside of God's holy abode dedicated to him, like he's the God, like he's the high priest, and he takes over as as ruler of the Jews, and he appointed who he wanted to be the high priest. So he then made himself an enemy of God time and time again. It doesn't matter if he told them to cleanse the temple and redo the sacrifices. He then already made himself an enemy. So let's see how that turned out for him. So we're going to read, let's see here, Antiquity of the Jews. So this is Antiquity of the Jews. We're going to read book 14. We're going to read chapter 8, section 1. We're going to read lines 127. And if you got the hard copy, it's going to be found on page 449. So let me get there in my hard copy. And let's find out what happened to Pompey. So this is book 14, chapter 8, section 1, line 127. It says, now after Pompey was dead, and after that victory Caesar had gained over him, Antipater, who managed the Jewish affairs, became very useful to Caesar when he made war against Egypt, and that by the order of Hyrcanus, for when the Mithridates of Perganianus was brought his auxiliaries and was not able to continue his march through Pelusium, but obliged to stay at Ascalon. Antipater came to him, conducting 3,000 of the Jews, armed men. And I think that's all we're going to do for right there. So we see that at the end, Pompey, in all of his greatness, was killed by a Roman, by the Caesar. The Caesar took Rome, took over Pompey's territory, and killed him. So we see once again death by his own kinsmen after he violated the Jews and went into their temple. So now ask yourself a question. Is this not divine judgment? Is this not divine judgment? And Hyrcanus was still around. But is this not divine judgment when this general goes inside of Jerusalem, slay the Jews, go inside of their temple in the Holy of Holies, and then as his life continued, he have a Roman come in, a Caesar, to take his spot and kill him? Is that not the Lord fighting against his enemies, fighting against those that destroyed the Jews? Is that not divine justice? I would say that it is. I would say that this is an act of the Lord fighting against the rulers of the nation. What we showed you in part 1, this is part 2. Time and time again, the Lord destroying, killing the adversaries of the Jews. Did he do it in the next day? No. Did he do it the next week? No. But did he do it? Yes. Every single time someone came against the Jews as an oppressor, they were destroyed. So now, let's show you how the narrative changed, right? So we got the Jews. We got the Jews of the first century come about now, right? So Pompey was the BC era. I think it was BC 63 or something like that. So now, let me get ready to open. Well, I'm not even going to open my eastward. Let's take you to the book of Acts. We're going to go to Acts 11. I guess I can read 25 and 26. 25 through 26. It says, Then departed Barnabas to Tarsus to seek Saul. And when he found him, he brought him unto Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So the first place they was called Christians were in Antioch. But we're going to see something more important about the Christian narrative. So we got to understand, Christianity first started with Jews. It doesn't matter the title used to describe them. It didn't change that they were Jews. So it doesn't matter if they was Jews under the law of Moses or the Jews now following Christ, them being called Christians. They were still Jews. They would have still been considered the Lord's people. The covenant, the promise, and all of that stuff were to them. So the title Christians doesn't change that. That would be first. But let's see how the Lord fighting against the nations changed narratives, right? So now we got Christians introduced in the book of Acts. So, we're going to go to the Annals by Tacitus, right? The Roman historian. And we're going to speak about this guy called Nero. Now, everyone knows about Nero. So, we're going to read about Nero in Tacitus Annals, book 15, chapter 44. And this is what he says about Nero. Let me find it real fast. Such indeed were the precautions of human wisdom. The next thing to seek means of appropriating the gods. Let me make sure I'm on the right. I am. All right. And recourse was had to the Sibylline books, by the direction of which prayers was offered to Valcanus, Ceres, and Proserpina. Juno, too, was entreated by the matrons, first in the capital, then on the nearest part of the coast, whence water was procured to sprinkle the fane and image of the goddess. And there were sacred banquets and nightly vigils celebrated by married women. But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor, and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hand of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus, or Pontius Pilate, and the most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all the things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their central and become popular. So now we have Roman historian Tacitus speaking on Christ. So this will be outside sources, right? This will be a secondary source from a Roman historian proving that this Jesus the Christ character lived. Now you guys can say the Jews made it up, but now we have a Roman historian speaking on them too, just in case. So it was said that the followers of this Christus person was called Christians. We saw in the book of Acts where the name first started in Antioch. And by the time that Nero came around, it had expounded. Well, Nero was around in pretty much that same time period anyway. But by the time Nero was in all of his wilding out, all of his evils, Christians had went from Judea and had came over into the Romans. So for my people to say that it was only about the Jews, I'm sure Nero would not have cared just about the Jewish population worshiping this Christus guy. I'm pretty sure he was caring when the Rome itself was engulfed, no matter what their nationality was, with this belief. So now we have accordingly an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of a crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. So mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt, to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. So according to Tacitus, right, the Roman historian, Nero started warring against the Christians for apparently no reason. Said the fires came up in Rome because people were looking at Nero to overthrow him. So he changed the direction of it and he made them look another direction. Rome was burnt up. Nero blamed the Christians, said Christians hated mankind, and etc. So now, if anyone knows the modes of Christians, they were peaceful. They stayed away from evil people. They had their own community, and etc. They gave to the poor. They fed the hungry. They clothed the naked. They exhibited love amongst their neighbors and brothers and etc. So a very peaceful people. And the response of Nero was they was the ones who hated mankind. So he sent out a proclamation of death for them. He covered them with the skins of beasts. So this is what we can consider a tribulation period for my people who don't understand how tribulation periods work. This is how a tribulation period dealing with worship, religion actually works. Not people getting killed at convenience stores and stuff. That's not tribulation. Okay? A tribulation period from the biblical perspective is people being killed for their worship, for their beliefs. That's tribulation in the Bible. So unless people are getting killed at convenience stores for their beliefs, then it's not for the. Sorry, let me clear it. For their beliefs in the Most High God and His Son, it's not a tribulation period. It's not Jacob's trouble. Once again, it's not Jacob's trouble if it's not about the Lord and His Son and them getting killed for that cause. All right. So now they was covered with the skin of beast. They were torn by dogs and perished. They were nailed to crosses. They were used as candlesticks to illuminate the sky at nighttime. This is what the first century Christians went through just for believing on Christ. He only attacked Christians. He didn't go around saying, let me attack the Jews. Let me find the Jews. Hey, find the northern kingdom. If anyone say that they are Ephraim and etc., kill them. He wasn't going around destroying Jews. He was going around destroying people who considered themselves Christians. Okay, so we got Nero waging war on the Christians. Let's see if we can find something else. So this is the historical collection dealing with Nero. Let's see here. What else did Nero do? Let me see if I can find it here. Oh no, this is we're gonna go through his punishment later. It is stated. Let me see if I got it here. If I don't have it here, I'm just gonna say it. It was stated that Paul and Peter was also killed under the directions and proclamations of. In fact, I don't even gotta. Let me see here. I got my Eusebius Ecclesiastical History, complete and unabridged, right here in front of me. So let's see if I can actually find where Eusebius, right? He lived the 3rd century. We know that he's a historian for the church and etc. So let's see if we can find out if he stated anything about Nero. And I actually know he did. I had it marked, and for some reason, I closed my book. So let's see if I just can find it real fast. I don't want to paraphrase when I can read directly. So let's see if I can find Nero. Here we go, chapter 25. The persecution under Nero, in which Paul and Peter were honored at Rome with martyrdom in behalf of religion. This is verse 1, or line 1. When the government of Nero was now firmly established, he began to plunge into unholy pursuits and armed himself even against the religion of the God of the universe. To describe the greatness of his depravity does not lie within the plan of the present work, as there are many indeed that have recorded his history in most accurate narratives. Everyone may at his pleasure learn from them the coarseness of the man's extraordinary madness, under the influence of which, after he had accomplished the destruction of so many myriads without any reason, he ran into such guiltiness that he did not spare even his nearest relatives and dearest friends, but destroyed his mother and his brother and his wife, with very many others of his own family, as he would private and public enemies with various kinds of death. But with all of these things, this peculiar in the catalogue of his crimes was still wanting, that he was the first of the emperors who showed himself an enemy of the divine religion. So this is the first time that someone went against quote unquote Christianity. So now, the Roman Tertullian is likewise a witness of this. He writes as follows: examine your records. There you will find that Nero was the first that persecuted this doctrine. Once again, Nero was the first that persecuted this doctrine, particularly then when, after subduing all the East, he exercised his cruelty against all at Rome. We glory in having such a man the leader in our punishment. For whoever knows him can understand that nothing was condemned by Nero unless it was something of great excellence. Thus publicly announcing himself as the first among God's chief enemies, he was led on to the slaughter of the apostles. It is therefore recorded that Paul was beheaded in Rome itself, and that Peter likewise was crucified under Nero. This account of Peter and Paul is substantiated by the fact that their names are preserved in the cemeteries of that place even to the present day. And this was written in 3rd century CE. So now we got Eusebius explaining how Nero was the first one to present himself an enemy against God, dealing with the Christians. Once again, dealing with the Christians. So now this wasn't a law of Moses thing. This was a Christianity thing right here. So him fighting against the Christians. So let's see what Nero's fate was. So he made himself an enemy of the Christians and of God. So now we see that the fight went from the Jews to now Christians. So there was a change in the persecution. So you got Antiochus Epiphanes, Callias, Herod, even Pompey. These rulers, they were fighting against the Jews. But when Nero came in around the 60 BCs, he started fighting against the Christians. They were Jews by nationality, some of them, but in Rome they were Jews by nationality as well as Gentiles. But now we see the fight going to the Christians. So let's see how that ended for Nero. So we got the historycollection.com. This is a website dealing with Nero. Created by Natasha Sheldon, June 27, 2019. It says, on June 9th, 68 AD, Tiberius Claudius Nero Caesar, better known as Emperor Nero, died by his own hand after being declared an enemy of the state by the Roman Senate. It was an ignominious death for the last of the original imperial dynasty, the Julio-Claudians, deserted and reviled, Nero had fled Rome in disguise to the villa of one of his freedom. Once there, the man who had killed his wife, mother, and adopted brother without compunction and was rumored to have started the Great Fire of Rome spent the last few hours of his life attempting to avoid the inevitability of his death. Nero was so terrified of dying that he begged one of his servants to kill themselves to serve as an example to him before a troop of armed soldiers forced his hand. So if you guys don't understand what she just said, Nero told one of his servants, hey, kill yourself so I can see how it's done. So I can see the experience because I'm finna do it too. This is how crazy this man was. So now, it says, before a troop of armed soldiers forced his hands. Even then, he needed help to drive the dagger home. However, within months of his death, rumors began that Nero still lived and would return in glory to reclaim his empire. Over the next 20 years, as many as 3 false Neros came forward, claiming to be the notorious emperor and seized the imperial purple. So, if people don't understand what's going on with the beast in the Book of Revelation, we have a better understanding of how this beast was killed with a deadly wound and was able to revive using like a false resurrection. This is what they did with Nero. They gave him false resurrections. But we're not going to go over that right now in the Book of Revelation. We're just tending to what Nero did. So at the end of Nero's life, he was forced to commit suicide. He was declared an enemy of the state by the Roman Senate, the same Rome that he was over, declared him to be an enemy, and they made him flee his position, and he killed himself. So now, do we consider that divine vengeance? Nero persecuting the Christians because they follow, according to Tacitus, Christus. And our Bible tells us this Christus means Christ, which means anointed, the anointed, which means Messiah from the Hebrew narrative. So this Jesus the Christ, this Yeshua, the Messiah, the Messiah, or Yahshua, or Yahweh, or whatever name we're going to give him, because it's really not that important. His name, his authority and position is the importance of it. But just because they followed this Jesus character, they were put to death. Now, the same person who put them to death had to flee his position, his authority, and he committed suicide himself. We can see the same thing happen in the gospel with Judas. When Judas betrayed the Christ, he committed suicide. So now we got the Emperor Nero over Rome. When he persecuted the children of Christ, or the brothers and sisters of Christ, the children of the Most High, he was forced to kill himself. Divine judgment? I believe so. The Lord fighting against his enemies? I believe so. The Lord fighting against the enemies of his people? I would say so. Now, I got one more narrative to show you. Now, this is what people talk about dealing with when they said the book of Revelation is written, right? They'll tell us that the book of Revelation was written 95 AD under the guise of Domitian, right? And they'll say that that will prove that all things ain't been fulfilled because the book of Revelation was written under Domitian reign, according to some church father. And then y'all know my rebuttal. Well, if you go into the historical way that Israel worked, especially dealing with this apocalyptic literature and etc., they always wrote in the future on past events. And a lot of their apocalyptic literature, the people lived past the event they was writing about, and they used the apocalyptic literature to explain the event they're talking about. You can see it in the book of Enoch. You got the book of Enoch that came about in the BC era. The book of Enoch was talking about the Maccabean revolt and all that stuff. Why? It was written after the Maccabean revolt, but they put it in the time period of Enoch, right? They use Enoch as a guise to say Enoch was actually prophesying about it, but in reality, they had already lived through it. This is why they could actually write about it. But they was using apocalyptic literature to explain what happened in the spiritual realm, which led up to it being displayed in the carnal or the physical realm. This is how ancient Israelite literature worked. So it don't matter if the book of Revelation was written before 70 AD or after 70 AD. The point of it is what's written in the book of Revelation about 70 AD. That's the point. That's the point. It's what's written in it about 70 AD. Regardless if it's written before or after it, the events in Revelation is about 70 AD. But anyway, let's talk about this Domitian, right? Let's talk about Domitian, because he was another one that waged war against the Christians, right? So, this is the Bible study tools. It says the second persecution under Domitian, AD 81. The second persecution under Domitian, AD 81. The Emperor Domitian, who was naturally inclined to cruelty, first slew his brother. Notice how all of these people are brother slayers. Have you guys noticed that? Dealing with these Romans, they're always slaying their brothers. They're people that grew up with them. Don't this not put you in the mindset of Cain and Abel? Being a brother slayer, not loving your brother. This is actually going against the Christian doctrine anyway. No love for your brother. So these people are starting off with that of the mindset of Cain. But let's keep going on. First slew his brother, then raised the second persecution against the Christians. In his rage, he put to death some of the Roman senators, some through malice, and others to confiscate their estates. He then commanded all the lineage of David to be put to death. Among the numerous martyrs that suffered through this persecution was Simeon, the bishop of Jerusalem, who was crucified, and St. John, who was boiled in oil and afterward banished to Patmos. Flavia, the daughter of a Roman senator, was likewise banished to Pontus, and a law was made that no Christian, once brought before the tribunal, should be exempted from punishment without renouncing his religion. So you see, if Christianity isn't that important, right? If Christianity is made up, if it's not the way, if it's the Roman religion and all of this stuff, why do we have it in the history of the Romans that they try to tell people to denounce it? I don't understand it. I don't understand how it becomes the Roman religion when the emperors and Caesars of Rome was fighting against it. Make it make sense is all I can say about that situation. But here we have another persecution of the Christians, right? By Domitian. So he was telling them to renounce their religion. He wasn't telling them to renounce Judaism, renounce being a Jew, renounce following the law of Moses. He was telling them to renounce the religion of Christianity. Now, it says a variety of fabricated tales were during his reign composed in order to injure the Christians. Such was the infatuation of the pagans that if famine, pestilence, or earthquakes afflicted any of the Roman provinces, it was laid upon the Christians. These persecutions among the Christians increased the number of informers, and many, for the sake of gain, swore away the lives of the innocent. I'm going to read this a little bit more. Another hardship was that when any Christian were brought before the magistrates, a test of oath was proposed. When, if they refused to take it, death was pronounced against them. And if they confessed themselves Christians, the sentence was the same. So now, you see right here, and this is how the book of Revelation actually works. Using historical events, real-time events, to paint a picture of a historical reality, right? So he's using some of the things that he would have known was in real time, right? So that's if it was written after 70 AD. If it was written before 70 AD, he would have been using the part of Dionysius, which is right here also as I keep reading, what happened in 3rd Maccabees, where they had to put this symbol of that goddess on them. And if the person didn't put it on them, they would have been put to death. But the person did put it on them, they would have been able to buy, sell, or trade. So regardless, it happened twice. And notice it's about the same goddess, actually, but it happened twice. It happened after 70 AD and before 70 AD. So you could take any one of those. This is pretty much what the mark of the beast was. It ain't no vaccination or none of this stuff. The mark of the beast dealing with the Romans is, are you going to pledge yourself to the Roman Empire, or are you going to deny the Roman Empire? If you deny the Roman Empire, you get put to death. If you pledge yourself to the Roman Empire, either you take the oath or that symbol, you receive life, or that life that they give you. You don't die. Not life in Christ, but regular carnal life. So this is what the mark of the beast was to the ancient Israelites. Now, people today, you make it be whatever you want to. Each time something bad happened in the world, it's the mark of the beast. So, or it's Gog and Magog war. Whatever happened to China, people say it's Gog and Magog. Whatever happened around the world, whether it's cell phones, chips, and credit cards, now the vaccination is the mark of the beast. So, we can make it up all day. According to the biblical understanding, the ancient Israelite understanding, the mark of the beast was you taking the oath. Either you're for God, Jesus the Christ, or you're for Rome. Which one you pick? Rome. Okay. You can live. You can sell. You can buy. You can trade. Which one you pick? Christ. Kill him. That's what it was. All right, so now let's keep going. If they refuse to take it, I mean, and it says it right here. I mean, it literally says it right here. Another hardship was that when Christians were brought before the magistrates, a test oath was proposed. When, if they refused to take it, death was pronounced against them. And if they confessed themselves Christians, the sentence was the same. So you see, they took the oath. If the oath gave them life, if they went against the oath, they got death. This is the mark of the beast. This is what's going on in the book of Revelation. The following were the most remarkable among the numerous martyrs who suffered during the persecution. Dionysius, which was their god, the Rpk-Resurrection, was an Athenian by birth and educated in all the useful ornamental literature of Greece. I'm sorry, I thought they was using the god here. They making this person an actual person. But in the book of Maccabees, the 3rd Maccabees, that same name was actually the god. So I had to retract that one. He then traveled to Egypt to study astronomy. Let's see if this got anything to do with anything. And made very particular observations of the great and supernatural eclipse, which happened at the time of our Savior's crucifixion. Okay, here we go right here. And made very particular observations on the great and supernatural eclipse, which happened at the time of our Savior's crucifixion. And we know that if you read the Bible, the sky went dark when Christ was crucified. And we see the Bible in the Bible is talking about the sun being darkened, the moon not giving off her light, and etc. That was a sign for judgment. So that's always represented judgment. The sanctity of the conversation and the purity of his manners recommended him so strongly to the Christians in general that he was appointed Bishop of Athens. Nicodemus, a benevolent Christian of some distinction, suffered at Rome during the rage of Domitian's persecution. Wow, he killed Nicodemus too. Domitian was wilding out too. Uh, Praxedius and Gervasius was martyred at Milan. Timothy was the celebrated disciple of St. Paul and Bishop of Ephesus, where he zealously governed the church into AD 97. At this point, as the pagans were about to celebrate a feast called Catagogion, Timothy, meeting the procession, severely reproved them for their ridiculous idolatry, which so exasperated the people that they fell upon him with their clubs and beat him in so dreadful a manner that he expired of the bruises 2 days later. So now we got under Domitian, we got the persecution of the Christians again, right? So now let's go to the Britannica, the Britannica. Sorry about that. Dealing with Domitian, and let's see if we can find out what happened to him. Let's see here. Let me see here. Let's see if I can find out. All right, bet. So now it says Domitian, Latin for Caesar Domitianus Augustus, originally named until AD 81. Titus. Sorry about that. Am I still picking up? Hold on. All right, am I still picking up? Okay, yeah. Okay, then. Okay, yeah. I'm picking up because you responded to me. All right, bet. All right, so now, it says Domitian, Latin. All right, thank you. The mission we read the Latin, known chiefly for the reign of terror under which prominent members of the Senate lived during his last years. Titus Flavius Domitianus was the second son of the future Emperor Vespasian and Flavia Domitia. All these names are wrong, it's ridiculous. During the Civil War of AD 69 over the Emperor crown, Domitian remained unharmed in Rome, but on December 18, he took refuge in the capital with his uncle Flavius Sabinus, escaping into hiding when the capital was stormed by supporters of Vitellius. On the entry of his father's supporters in Rome, I bet 2 days later, he was saluted as Caesar and became praetor, next year. He attempted to turn the repressive military campaign of Petilius Cerilius in the Rhineland into a triumphal operation of his own. And for this and other excessive, he is said to have required his father's pardon when the later arrived at Rome in autumn AD 70. Domitian, however, was uh, Princeps Juventatius, an emperor prince, and was consul 6 times in Vespasian's lifetime. Moreover, it was recognized that he would eventually succeed his brother Titus, who had no son and was 11 years older than Domitian. On Vespasian's death in 79, Domitian expected the same position as Titus had received under Vespasian, in particular, tribunician power and some form of imperium. These were not granted, and Domitian was evidently antagonistic to his brother and is alleged to have hastened his death, which occurred on September 13, AD 81. So now let's see if we can find out about what happened to Domitian. Let's see here. If I did it wrong. Let's see here. What happened to them? Right here, what happened to Domitian? We're going to go to the historynaked.com. Naked history, the assassination of Domitian. It created in September 20th, 2017 by ER, whoever that is. Titus Flavius Domitianus was born the youngest son of Emperor Vespasian in 51 CE. We're not going to read all that. We're going to find out what happened to him. All right, right here. As the 15th anniversary of his reign approached, according to Suetonius, as an astrologer, predicted that the emperor would die around midday on September 18th. Naturally, Domitian was nervous and restless, but settled down to try to accomplish something. Petronius Secundus and Norbanus had recruited Stephanus, an ex-slave of Flavius Clemens, banished widow, to the deed. Stephanus approached Domitian with a dagger concealed his bandages from a fake. Stephanus approached Domitian with a dagger concealed his bandages from a fake wound. They fought with Stephanus wounding Domitian in the groin, but he was also fatally wounded. Both died on the palace floor. The last Flavian emperor was dead. He was denied a state funeral and his name removed from the state building. But let me see if I can find another one. Let me see if I can find one more. I don't like how that read. Oh, it says the same thing. So hold on. What? I'm back. It pretty much says the same exact thing. On September 18th, the emperor seemed in a restless mood, according to historian Suetonius. Okay, so this is a historian that actually recorded this. It says, for some days, Stephanus had been wearing bandages, supposed after an accident. In fact, the bandages were concealing a dagger, which he now produced behind his back. He handed the emperor another document, and as Domitian began to read, Stephanus stabbed him violently in the groin. Many more servants clustered around. More blows fell. In the confusion, Stephanus himself was mortally wounded. But by now, Domitian's robe was scarlet with blood. A few moments later, the last of the Flavian emperors were dead. So we have Domitian being assassinated by Stephanus, who was hired by some of the people that was working for Domitian. And it said that they even took Domitian names out of the let me go here again. They took his name out of, let me see here, from the state buildings. He was denied a state funeral, so they denied this man a funeral, and they removed his name from the state buildings. Rome did not like him. So once again, you have another person that persecuted the Christians, that persecuted Christ's people, the people persecuted the persecution of the Christians, which would have been this new sect who was dedicated to Christ and designated for Christ. This individual of the Roman sort persecuted them, and his life ended with his own citizens of Rome hating him, as well as him being assassinated. So could we not say that is indeed divine judgment? That is judgment from the heavenlies. Christ fighting against the enemies of his people, the enemies of his Father, and his enemies himself. And for the last one, I want to show us more of a biblical sources, right? Once we go to, let me see here, right here. Once we go to Matthew, this regular old Matthew, you go to Matthew 23. Let's see what's going to happen here. Matthew 23, we're going to start at verse number 29. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because ye build the tomb of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous. Notice the scribes and Pharisees are Jews. Jews, Israelites by nature, Jews. And say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves, that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? He's talking to those first century Jews. Wherefore behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues. Oh, sorry, my bad. Let me read that again. Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes. And some of them you shall kill and crucify. Same thing that the Romans did to them. And some of them you shall scourge in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zachariah son of Barachias, who you slew between the altar and the temple, or the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, that killest the prophets and stoned them which are sent unto thee. How often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and ye would not? Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. So we have the proclamation by the Messiah that the Pharisees and the scribes who persecuted the Christians. Remember, the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch, so they were considered Christians, right? The even Israel, this will be those of the dark, not those of the light. Even Israel was considered to be an enemy of Christ and his Father. This is why they was able to say, "Let his blood be upon us." He said, "Hey, do you want Barabbas or do you want the Messiah?" They chose Barabbas. We found out in Deuteronomy 32 that the last judgment was going to be when the Lord judged his people, because his people was going to be the one that killed the Messiah. In Matthew 10, Christ actually tell his disciples that they was going to be persecuted from city to city. We find out in Matthew 23, the ones that's persecuting them are their brothers, the Jews. So by the time we hit Luke, I think it's Luke 19. Let me see. Let's see if it's Luke 19. Let me see. Yes, Luke 19, verse number. Let's start. I'm going to start at verse 39. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, will rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou hast known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, that they should not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. So Christ was crying over Jerusalem, over the temple, because he knew what the outcome of their their disobedience was. Them making the Lord an enemy would result in their destruction. Christ is crying over that. Once again, Deuteronomy 32 says the Lord would judge his enemies, the ones who make themselves his enemies. So he's judging the enemies of his people who left from being law follower Jews to being Christ following Jews, or what they call Christians. Don't get caught up with the title. But in Luke 21, and we're finna get ready to end it. In Luke 21, we see the ending result. In Luke 21, let's see what's keep going on. Cause hold on, y'all. I keep getting tagged, so I'm trying to make sure that my recording is not messing up. That's why someone is tagging me. So hold on. Let's see here. Oh, no. Okay, I'm not getting tagged. All right, so now on Luke 21, we're going to do verse number 20. So this is when Christ is actually prophesying about the destruction of Jerusalem because of what they did against his people. So Luke 21:20. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. So according to Christ, when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies, that would be the days of vengeance, that all things written would be fulfilled. So the only thing we got to do is go into the days of vengeance. So the days of vengeance is what I've been quoting from Deuteronomy 32, which is the Song of Moses. And let's see what the days of vengeance say. Verse 26, I said I will scatter them into corners. I will make a remembrance of them to cease from among men. Let's see what else the rest of the days of vengeance means to the Lord. So he got the scattering of his people, their remembrance being no more. Verse 35, to me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For the Lord shall judge his people and repent himself for his servants. When he see that their power is gone, and there is none shed up or left, and he shall say, where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted? Who was their gods? In the first century, their gods were none other than the Roman emperors. They were doing emperor worship. They were supposed to be worshiping their gods as emperors. So now the days of vengeance is here. Where are your gods? Where are the ones that you said that you gave your allegiance to? Where are the Romans? Why aren't they helping you? In fact, I'm going to send the Romans against you. The ones that you was looking for help, them going to be the ones who do my judgment, right? So the days of vengeance. Let's keep reading. Verse 41. And if I welt my glittering sword, and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies, and will reward them that hate me. Who was his enemies? Who was the one that hate him? Let his blood be upon us and our children. That's what they said in the first century in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, in the city of Jerusalem, they made themselves the enemies of the Messiah. If you become the enemy of the Son, you are the enemy of the Father. He was going around preaching peace and kindness. What was the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes doing? Running around trying to tempt him, trying to call him wicked, trying to find ways to kill him, trying to find ways to trap him up. This is what they was doing the whole time. So now he said these are the days of vengeance. So what's happening? I'm judging my people. Who was his people? The children of Israel. What's happening? Verse 42. I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and of the captives from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy. Is this not what Christ told them? All the blood, this is what he told them in Matthew 23. That's why we read it. All the blood shed is going to come upon your heads this generation. This all happened first century. Verse 43. Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people. So he's killing his servants. So who is he calling his people? If you separate the scripture right, and we find out the disciples and those who follow Christ in the first century was called Christians, and then they were being persecuted for Christ's words, then his people has to be the ones that were being persecuted for his words, which they call Christians. So notice the ones in darkness, the law followers who was persecuting the Jews that followed Christ. This is what the battle between lightness and darkness was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you got the solar versus the lunar calendar, and you have the law of Moses, Pharisees. We under the Pharisee, the Levitical priesthood, the Pharisees, and all of that are the ones who follow Christ. This is what the war was about. So now he said, "Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people." These are the converts, because we find out that through history, Christianity converted and went through all nations of the habitable earth. So rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. That's what he told them in Matthew 23. All of the righteous blood shed will come upon you guys. He's avenging the blood of his servants. And this is what we see in Revelation chapter 6. They're saying, how long, Father, before you avenge our blood? So all of this is talking about Rome coming in, destroying Jerusalem, because Christ sent Rome in to destroy Jerusalem. On top of him destroying the Roman Empire, eventually, they actually got destroyed. I think it was forced. In fact, we're going to look it up in just a second. And will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and unto his people. So the ones that he was going to be merciful to was the ones that obeyed and followed Christ. These was the ones that fled into the mountains as Christ told them. So now let's look up, this is the last thing. When was Rome destroyed? Because I know people want Rome to be around today. Just because some of the factions used in the Roman government got taken over, it doesn't mean Rome itself came back, especially biblical Rome. That's out of here. 476 AD, Rome was destroyed. And I'm going to say Rome destroyed. Let me see if this is going to pull up. Let's see here. It says the darkening age. Let me see here. The Christian destruction of the classical world. So the theologian Edward Gibbon. Let me see here. And do I need to even read this? Destruction of Athena. In other words, let's see if I can find it. Because if I can't, I'm just going to skip it. But it is known throughout the scholarly world that when Rome adopted Christianity, eventually Christianity caused the destruction of the Roman Empire. They quit being as violent. They quit being as harmful, allowing other violent, harmful nations to come in, those barbarians to destroy Rome. So even when Rome kept coming against Christianity, the Lord defeated that, making Christianity the dominant religion in Rome. So not only did the Lord fight against the Romans and the paganism that Rome had, he actually took over Rome, making Christianity the dominant religion of that. And just in case you forgot what the Romans did in the Bible, he eventually allowed Rome to be destroyed. So there you have right there. So that would be the Lord fighting against all nations, time and time and time again. He always fought against his enemies. He always fought against the enemies of his people. First, he started fighting against the enemies of those that came against the Israelites. Then he started fighting against the enemies that came against Christians. So you guys should be careful when you're speaking and trying to go against Christianity. You should be careful because we have historical proof of what the Lord do to the enemies of Christians. And then I would be able to close my book with that. All of the information is here. If you want to dispute it, I have my replay on. I leave the replays on for a purpose. So you can go back later on and listen to it. But this is Elvin Israel from the Assembly of Sound Doctrine, Chandler. You see my picture? That will be my YouTube channel. Please subscribe to it. And make sure you like the videos, share the videos. Even if you dislike, make sure you do that also. We got, if you want other sources you can look up SF Wisdom on YouTube. Look up Rpk-Resurrection, Prophecy, and Kingdom on YouTube. And Batson Better Life on TikTok. I think I got it right this time. Bobby, did I get it right? All right. Let's say it one more time. All right, well, you got it right. Y'all heard him. It's not picking up good audio on my end, so and I'm pretty sure that's because I got a phone call. So give me 1 sec.
Thank you for clicking on the channel.
AOSD.
Assembly of Sound Doctrine Channel.
Assembly of Sound Doctrine.
AOSD, Rpk, Resurrection, Prophecy, Kingdom. Like, subscribe, share. Let's go.
Come get a lesson. I'm teaching blessings. No need for guessing. I'm knowledge testing. It's truth time. The wise will shine. And the wicked will pine. I'm a righteous kind. Break out of trouble, I'm keeping it subtle. Just me and my brothers and sisters. They left us, we fixing the puzzle, no stressing. I come to the bunk of the struggle with aunties and cuz. Wanna read it, believe it. They should be back. See it and need it like a kid back. Breaches and pieces like a Kit Kat, Akis and I get seated. It's a Hollywood, not Dollywood. Alpha love, the kingdom within. AOSD is finessing. Rpk, let your journey begin. It's a Hollywood, not Dollywood. Alpha love, the kingdom within. AOSD is finessing. Rpk, let your journey begin. AOSD, 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 Assembly of Sound Doctrine.